pronouns she, her. Thank you, Faith. Uh, and I will be helping facilitate our evening lecture and educational session with Emo. Uh, if you haven't had the chance to read the bio, Emo is the growth coordinator in which he recruits church plant leads, supervises and coordinates all new emerging migrant, diasporic, and racialized communities of faith in the United Church of Canada. He also coordinates the anti-racism courses for UCCan ministers and lay leaders. He had previously worked in international development within interfaith contexts in Southeast Asia. He also taught in Protestant and Catholic seminaries and universities, focusing on doing local theologizing and decolonizing mission structures. We had the pleasure of having Emo come teach my formation class this year, and one of my favorite lectures so far, so I'm very much looking forward to our evening together. And if you all would like to join me in a moment of prayer before we begin, I invite you into this space. This is the prayer for education that was published by the United Church of Canada. So if you would like to join me in a moment of prayer. Wise and knowing God, through you all things are known, from the mysteries of the world to the stories we share with each other. Your wisdom illuminates our world. Through you we learn more and more. We study and we teach each other so that we can all grow together to better understand your creation. Through you we find wisdom, hidden in parable and fable, in the experiences of our elders and in the innocence of our children. Wise and knowing God, fill us with your knowledge and love so that we may cross the earth sharing it with each other. Amen. And I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Katie. Um, my claim to fame in terms of when it comes to the East, or at least the Maritimes, is that my wife is from Cape Breton, Sydney River. So when you talk about Lydenburg, yes, we've been visited in around that area, and so. But other than that, we visit once a year, and so because but more on the Halifax side right now. Oh, the other thing too is that when COVID started, I started looking for a church online. I eventually ended up becoming a member of Bedford United Church. For some reason, I should be part of the regional the regional life of down there. What is that? Bermuda and Nova Scotia Regional Council. That whole. Um, the the topic is microaggression, and I think the definition for microaggression was sent to you as well in the invitation, or at least to register. So what I plan to do, and if you don't mind me sharing my is that this is what we want to do because of that we have about I know I, we have an hour and a half, but we don't need to use up the whole an hour and a half. Except what I want to do is that utilize most of the time in terms of some conversations around this and learning the dynamics of that and responses of regarding microaggression. So we'll just go back in the beginning, how it was defined or been given to you. You've read that already. And we look at a poem by Inzwi Monikwa. The last name sounds familiar to you, mainly because Innsby has been very involved the past 2 years, especially with the Indigenous Racialized Youth Program that we have. So, in fact, Innsby right now is she works for us for about 5 hours a week to help with assisting us in putting the program the program together between Springwater, who works for the Indigenous Ministry and Justice Unit, and myself. So, hey, Shepard, you're there. Thank you very much. And then we'll have some reflection questions from the poem. And then we'll look at another This time it's a video. It's a picture, and then not just a picture, but also an audio that we will listen to by Amelia. Amelia was a part of another when we ran our Black Young Black Scholars program 2 years, 2.5 years ago. This came out of her research, and so we look at that, and then we'll close at the end with some reflection, and throughout though in between, I'm looking at the number of people here, so we're not going to go in breakout rooms, but we'll keep the screen open to everybody for question and answers, or feel free to interrupt when you want to. Don't be shy. So let's get started with this, with the definition. Can somebody please read that in your screen? Somebody off your screen. I hope it's big enough. So don't be shy, just anyone.
I don't mind reading.
Okay, thank you, Katie.
Microaggressions. Subtle, often unintentional comments, actions, or behaviors that convey stereotypes, biases, or derogatory assumptions about a marginalized group. These can include remarks like, "You're so articulate," or "Where are you really from?" While seemingly minor, microaggressions cumulatively reinforce systematic inequalities and can have a significant impact on individuals' mental and emotional well-being.
So I will leave the definition on the screen while we have a little bit of reflection on this. One thing I want to say, when you have white folks and racialized people in the same space, and we're talking about microaggression, we need to understand that the understanding and experience of microaggression are different from both group of people. The perception is also different. So later on, we'll look at some of the reactions when we witness or even participated in microaggression. But it's always important to name that from the beginning, that the perception coming from white folks being the dominant culture or the dominant people group here in Canada or even the United Church of Canada, as well as the racialized folks, including Indigenous and racialized people in the United Church of Canada and Canadian society as a whole, they perceive, or we all perceive, microaggression very differently. So I just want to, from the get-go, put that on the table. And so we have a good sense that we include that in the framework that we're building here as we understand the dynamics of microaggressions. Based on the definition so far, are there anything that stands out for you? Anything that you want to comment off the bat?
My name's Shannon, she, her. I can tell you that I have an experience of a microaggression from just about 5 minutes ago. Um, I am advertising for a job in my house, working with a young woman with an intellectual disability. I just I want to read you what this woman wrote in the question. The question to go along with the application is, please tell me about your experience working with people with disabilities. And this individual wrote, I've worked with autistic individuals. I have a youth worker diploma and a CCA certificate. Also have worked in a nursing home and loved working with VON, but was let go and replaced by East Indian individuals, myself and 4 others. So those kinds of microaggressions about those people take our jobs, like she doesn't say that exactly, but yeah, I think it's a good example.
I appreciate that story, Shannon. And pretty much the whole time here tonight will be about your stories. And you have to position and locate yourself in the story in the whole what we would call microaggression. But thank you very much. And in this case, Shannon, you're the one. You're an observer. You're reading a conversation, and you're in some ways beginning to analyze what it is and appreciate how you have shared that. Thank you. Anybody else before we go to the next slide?
Well, I'm thinking that oftentimes uh, people of privilege or who are in a socially less marginalized group think that these are innocent comments and sometimes don't understand when their words are not appropriate for the context. And so that's kind of, yeah, it's hard work. It's hard work when you're on the privileged side.
Thank you very much for naming that. And I hope that we will name some things here tonight without prejudice to anyone who wants to share. Nobody's going to judge. It's an experience that we will learn from everybody. Thank you, Susan. Katie, you had your hand raised.
Mhm. I think one of the steep learning curves too for a lot of non-racialized folk or white folk would typically be that moment they realize that microaggressions are happening around them and they hadn't really been aware of it. Um, Especially because some of them can feel so minor. And then you start to notice certain patterns or you notice behaviors that keep popping up and then your eyes kind of just go open and you go, oh no, this has been happening right before me and I've been complicit. And so I think, as Shanna's talking about, like observing this, sometimes we are observing it and we're not even noticing it. And so I think one of the best uh, outcomes of talking about microaggressions is we notice it more and we recognize it in our environments. So,
Thank you, Katie. Any more? This sets at least as a background to some of the knowledge that we already have. I just want to go back to Shannon because the example you made or you shared is not necessarily about racial experience or but with people with disabilities. And so microaggression as a term can be experienced by different disadvantaged groups. And we can actually participate in that. So just be aware of that. Most of the examples and the conversation we have tonight will probably revolve around the experience of racialized experiences, or what we call racism. But I want to make us aware that microaggressions can happen anytime there is a group or an individual that is disadvantaged. And in the United Church, we are very much sensitive to those groups, mainly communities, because they are the ones we want to, well, in our social justice work, we not only do we want to be advocates on there with them, but also walk with them, accompany them, and become not just advocates, but seekers of justice. Hey, this is a song that we normally sing. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So here is the poem by Enzui. It's three-part. I know I just put some of the script, but I didn't put include part three intentionally. But let's listen to them, and if you can follow it in your screen, at least from the script, that's okay. Please do so. But I want us to listen to Inzui's poem. Make sure I think her voice is loud enough. Make sure.
Part 1. Wonder. I wonder what you think about when you leave the house. Did I take everything? Where are my keys? Because I think, do I have my ID? Do my clothes look non-threatening? I wonder what you think about when you're in a store. Do I need this or do I just want it? Because I think I haven't taken anything, so why are they following me? Don't forget the receipt because they'll ask for it at the exit. I wonder what you think about when you go to school. I can't wait to see my friends. When am I ever going to use algebra? Because I hope no one says the N word to me again today. I wonder what you think about when you go to church. I really enjoy this song because I hope no one touches my hair without asking. Yes, I know my English is good. I have been bilingual since the age of 4. I wonder what crosses your mind when you hear police sirens, when you watch the news and see another shooting of a racialized person, when your path comes across a black person, when you only heard grace when I introduced myself as Inspirashe Grace Munigwa. I wonder if, like me, you wonder about this too. Part 2. Don't be sensitive. It's not always about race. Then why am I terrified when I leave home, but you're not? Why am I followed in shoppers, but you're not? Why does my body tense up around white people, but yours does not? Why do both my hands have to be visible when I reach for my wallet, but yours do not? It has nothing to do with white privilege. Then why were my multiple degrees not enough, but the one you have was? Why was my English not proficient enough, but yours was? Why was I asked, "Are you supposed to be here?" but you were not? Why was I told to calm down when I disagreed, but you were not? Why do I need to climb 1,000 steps to get far, but you do not? Why can't you let it go? It was centuries ago. Then why do my genes remember? Every panic attack, every anxious thought, every doctor's checkup is a reminder of slavery, a reminder of colonization, a reminder of the trauma, a reminder that this is not over. Why have you forgotten? Why do you not remember? Why do you not hear my cries as I yell, "Black Lives Matter"? Why aren't you listening? Why are you always talking? When you say equality, I ask, what about equity? When you preach, all are welcome, I ask, where is my seat? You're right, it's not about race. It's about the systemic racism. It's about white supremacy. It's about white privilege. It's about separate but equal. It's about you. Part 3, keeping it brief. I had a dream that one day, yeah, we're still dreaming. All lives matter, except mine. The church thrives for justice for all, except me. You just repeated yourself in all your poems, so it's redundant. But I have to. Why are you getting angry? Because I had to repeat myself. Then why did you? Because you didn't hear what I said. All you heard was complaining.
Let's pause a little bit and give a silent reflection before we move to the next slide.
Part 1, Wonder.
Sorry. So we heard it. I hope you had your audio put out. Here are the first few reflections that I would encourage you to please participate. If you want to type it in the chat to get going, please feel free to do so. But I would encourage you to let's utilize the time together and the space to let us hear your voice and your responses. So the question is, what did you hear and what were you feeling while listening?
Looks like if it's catching, I think it's blue. Well, that's because it's turned on.
No. John or John?
Well,
sorry, we cannot hear you clearly. Okay. Go ahead. Anybody else?
One thing I could hear was grief. It was a profound sense of grief in her
You want to keep going?
expression.
Yeah.
And it's one of those when you're listening, you notice more about your own experience and how unique it is. In contrast, as somebody who has not lived the same experiences. So it was impactful.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. Others?
I guess I heard her anger, but I had to, again, when you said, what are you feeling when you're listening? I felt, but what do we do? What are you recommending that I do about this? Sorry, maybe a simplistic point of view, but it struck me.
In fact, there's truth, there's wisdom in thinking that way. For all experiences of microaggression that racialized folks, indigenous folks, racialized folks experience, there is a sense that we're waiting. What would the other do? But then we can go back to that later on. Hopefully, we'll get some answers from you folks on that key question, because that's where actually we're ending. Thanks, Kevin.
Once I was ahead of the game, I'll take it.
No, no problem. Well, that's good. Thank you. What about the others?
I heard resignation in her voice, like this is part of my lived experience, and you don't know anything about it, and you're not making any effort to try. That's what I heard, and then I felt shame because I had not heard completely, and I had not seen completely.
Thank you, Susan. All your responses so far, make sure you keep it. We keep it, right? So we put it on the table, or we're not parking it, but kind of put it on a suspended space, because we will be picking them back and bringing them back to our conversations. How about the others? Shepard and Webster are racialized folks. They hear so tell us, help us. What did you hear? And what were you feeling while you were listening as racialized people?
Yeah, as for me, I think I listened to this before, but I never knew you were going to use this. So I realized that we are in a situation whereby we have limited options. I felt different when I was listening to this. I never thought the way she presented it when I was back home in Zimbabwe, in my own people. But I really understand it. It's something terrifying to move out of your house. You need to put all your ducks in order. You need to make sure you are not suspicious. Whatever you do, you have to think twice. Whether you are in a shop, you have to make sure you are presentable. You have to convince everyone that, no, I'm also a human being.
Thank you. Webster, you want to speak, to share? I'm being a teacher. Sorry.
It's like a lot has been said already, and the shepherd has taken some of my words. Yeah, the way I know is we personally, and when I was listening to her, it sounds different. I couldn't believe whether she is the one talking. Yeah, I learned that microaggression is common and is there with us, and we some of the statements at the times we don't realize that they may hurt someone. So I am challenged to be a bit careful whenever I try to speak, because almost out of 10 words I speak, oh, I won't be surprised if 3 out of 10 of that nature. Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you, Webster. How about the others?
Yes, I'm Cameron here, and I got a sense of frustration, huge sense of frustration from her, and a huge sense of frustration inside within me. The fact that we really haven't progressed very much, tackling this racial issue for the last 100 years. We still seem to be faced with the same bigotry, white supremacy, or looking at people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, with suspicion, with fear, with so many different emotions that we have as white people. I mean, I read the book White Fragility, and that really opened my eyes and ears and my soul to what Black people go through. And this her poem just brought back all that stuff from that book, and that sense of frustration. So yeah, I'm glad I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. I just want you to hold that book that you mentioned, White Fragility, and bring it back later, because there's a story that more to that. Thank you. Let's go to the next one, because now we'll try to reframe. The question is, what did you hear and what were you feeling? Let's reframe it from the lens of Inzui, of indigenous racialized folks. So the question is, what are they saying? So, and what are they feeling about what they're experiencing? So from our lens, we're perceiving something. Now we're asking the question, what are they really perceiving? What are they going through? Let's just have some conversations around this. You can be philosophical if you want.
I
So
shouldn't talk if you wanted to be philosophical, but
go ahead.
I
Whatever is be good.
I think that um like a certain amount of frustration in having to repeat themselves, but then also in people saying, why do you keep repeating yourself? Like that really stuck out for me, that kind of sentiment in the why are your poems always about the same thing? And can't you move on from this? And just like the privilege of white folks like myself being able to not watch the news if we get overwhelmed by it. I'm part of a diverse family. I have a son who is Black and a daughter who is Latinx, and then two honorary sons who are Asian, and two daughters who have intellectual disabilities. And so we're very diverse as a family, and like what I had to teach my Black son to interact within this world is different than the way that you have to treat a white son in how to interact in this world. And just like the level of unjustness in this is so extreme and so ingrained, and people just don't get it. And so I that's what I feel from her is like, I don't know how to make you get it. And I don't know why I have to keep saying it. And also that frustration that it's marginalized people or people who are on the periphery or vulnerable people who have to teach the other people. Otherwise, how will the majority learn? Anyway, that's a lot of garble.
Well, Shannon, I have a question that interested me. Um, so where do you learn about Black culture that would help your son as you help as a mother to your son?
So it's an interesting question. Jack, my son was born in Chicago and I adopted him. He was adopted and he has contact with his birth family. And so he is able to have contact with his birth mom and birth uncle, and they're pretty close. And so he can ask and kind of deal with some of those questions that they can see it through a lens that I can't. But the Black culture in Nova Scotia is very particular and different than even across Canada, let alone African American culture. And that's been more of a struggle because um, like going up to folks with brown skin and saying, "Hey, I'd like to be your friend. Can you be a mentor to my kid?" Like it's ridiculous. And so I, like we've done what we can organically, but it's tough. It's a tough thing to kind of be embedded and enough within a culture for him to be able to have that experience. Now that he's older, he's in his 20s, he's able to kind of experience some of that a little bit more. But again, it's not just like there's a Black culture, right? Like there's African culture, and then within Africa there's Nigerian culture, and there's and like Zimbabwe culture. Like it's not one thing. And so it's a little tricky. Sorry, my computer's on a pillow, so it's slipped back.
Thank you very much, Shannon. So how about the others? Anything else? Anything you want to add to this? This is how we generate knowledge, people. Not from the teacher, but from the participants. The more we share from our experiences, the more knowledgeable we become. Go
I
ahead,
would
Katie.
I would almost attribute one of the feelings that they're feeling would be almost a burnout because it's this consistent dealing with the same issue that you're having to repeat yourself. And you're having to basically cry out for people to listen to you over and over and over again. And a lot of times people will go, "Well, we didn't know." And it's like, "I've been telling you for years," kind of deal. And it's been an ongoing frustration for many that it feels like they're shouting at a wall. And so I think there's that. I had a conversation earlier today with someone about how unfortunate it is that we burn out our minority speakers because we task them with speaking to this in every single group. And that, well, one, they're often not fairly compensated, but two, it's we also tap on the only one person who speaks on this over and over and over again, and it becomes a frustrating thing, and I could sense a real tiredness and a real frustratedness, and I think that's where I sense the burnout feelings kind of bubble up.
I mean, it's February, right? What month is it?
Burnout month.
Black History Month.
Well,
And then
that too,
normally
yeah.
I would get a lot of folks come to me and said, help me find another Black speaker because we've used just about everybody for the past several years. We want,
Yep.
so they're in that mode of reusing or whatever. But in any case, yes, there's that issue. There's that reality. Before we go to the next question, any more want to share? Go
Hi.
ahead, Dana.
So, sorry, I'm just listening and I'm fascinated by the conversation. So that's sort of where I'm at. But I think for me, it, what I heard and what I felt, I feel is can be maybe perceived from the same, I guess, reflection. Like I feel what they are saying, or what she was saying, is truth. I think speaking the truth. And what they are feeling is, I think I would agree with everybody, frustration is what I heard in the um, phrases that were used within the poem.
Thank you. So the next one is we've already done this, but the next question is the more telling one. Who gets the last word on what is microaggression? Just feel free. Go ahead.
I would take a leap to say it would be the person who feels they've experienced it.
And I hope that's the consensus here. In remembering that, though, as we move to the next slide, it doesn't mean there cannot be any conversation. It doesn't mean it's the door is closed for any learning. But often when we want to learn, the way we pose the question and the language we use could also be microaggressive. So we hopefully tonight we'll learn a little bit more on some of those.
What about the issue of denial of microaggression? Doesn't that give the person, do you get the right to do that?
Kevin, you're correct again. It'll be on the next slide. Or maybe in this slide. Actually, some of you, if as ministers, you probably have taken, you most likely have taken the introduction to anti-racism and racial justice. We are changing the whole curriculum and focusing on microaggression. And there's a part there in the courses that you've taken on this, and that's what Kevin had raised. And that's good though. Appreciate it. Here we go. So here are the feelings that many white folks may voice when talking about racism or racial harassment, including microaggression. So just look at those. Feelings or responses or reactions. Which one do you resonate with or have observed or have felt yourself? And which one do you want to aspire to?
I felt all of them. But I think humiliation.
Give us one example out of all of them. From all.
I think what I would like to, I guess, be better at is being humble with regards to, I guess, being like humble in the sense that knowing that I don't know, and that I need to be open and learn and willing to listen and take a step back, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And the others? What about Ian? Let's hear from you. You haven't said much. You want to just share one or two out of this to name?
I'm just listening and taking in everything that is being said. I'm always perpetually curious, so that's regardless of whether it's a microaggression or whatever's in my presence. So I think it's just continuing to ask questions without having the answer to anything, and going by each person's individual experience, and hearing, as I say, their truth and their reality. And I think that's should always be the starting place.
Thank you. Any else? Some of the rest, I don't see your faces, but I assume you're still there listening. Feel free to join us, please. Go ahead, Mary Jolene.
I think I identify most with anxiety because I'm guessing that a microaggression would be something that would be I would be unaware of it until I was made aware of it. And then my initial reaction would be I've caused harm to someone, and how do I first of all how do I help heal that harm that I've caused, and then make sure I don't do it again in the future to this person or to anybody else.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone who want to name one of these as something you've experienced or observed?
Yes, I guess I've experienced astonishment in so many ways. Like, I have really good friends who profess to be welcoming Christians in their church, not United Church, but church. I'm in Florida, so
okay.
I when I'm down here, I try to find a church that, and these people are really good friends. We were neighbors at one point, but they always profess to be so welcoming, and you know, they, in the church. But we sit down and watch television, and he says to me, when the commercials come on or shows or whatever on the television, he said, you can't find a white person on the ads anymore. And I'm like, what? You know, like it's I'm astonished by things like that. Like, well, even if that I never noticed personally, you know, but if that was the case, well, maybe it's about time we had some black people in the ads. You know, like it's been pretty much a white society for ads for generations, and you know now we have black people in our ads, which is a great thing. But this guy who's supposed to be so welcoming and professes to be so Christian and you know with no discrimination in his thought process, and he comes out with a statement like that, you know that's a microaggression if anything was. But like that's the astonishment that hits me when I hear people who are supposed to be in tune or in touch with, you know, the issues that are out there, and they continue to make comments like that. That's what astonishes me. So, anyway,
let me go to the next thing here because it correlates with what you're saying in terms of the gravity of it. It seems to be you're just commenting on a commercial, right? As minor as it is, but all microaggressions they're all expressions of racial harassment.
But it's just,
yeah. And in this case, you as a sensitive person, you're hearing it, but no racialized or indigenous person hearing it though. So the next question, and one thing that we will move into, is that if you're the one hearing it, then what do you do? Or what do we do? How do we respond? So we're getting to Kevin's ending. Getting there. So here we go. Accountability test. Okay, recognizing what we call deter spotting. You raised the word denial. But there are three types of pushbacks when talking about racism or anti-racism. One is detouring, or divert from an uncomfortable topic. Second is derailing, minimize or explain away the reality of racism and power and white privilege. And we can also include here the white supremacist culture. And then there's denial. Claim experiences of racism aren't real. Now, I think there's another D that you can think of and include here. If you do, help me. We can add on to that. Put it in the chat and we'll add on to that. But here's the test. Here's the quiz that we'll be doing. So I'll be showing you one thing at a time and just name it or put it in the chat. Say it out loud. What do you think it is? Is it detouring, derailing, or denial? Okay?
Denial.
I don't see race. What is that?
Denial.
Denial?
Go with denial too.
Denial.
Okay. You feel free to say another, to say another one if you think it's in the end,
I
are we
think
all
it's
God's
derailing.
people? Derail. Okay. I'm colorblind. I don't see color.
A detour. I don't know. It's the same as number one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like diverting from it's trying to change the topic. We don't need to talk about this.
Textually, I think it can also be multiple of these. It depends on how the person proceeds afterwards. Like if they really start digging into it, um, then usually they start saying all of those things in that one sentence.
Yes. But the colorblind though, I think it could be deterred, derailing, or denial. One of those things in context. But you're right. Right now, it's just a game though. It's nice to play. Oh, they discriminate too. Mainly when we hear this, I'm saying I'm not the only racist person. They're also racist.
Derailing.
Derailing.
Or
Okay.
detour. Yeah.
Here's a question for you. Can indigenous and racialized people be racist?
No, because they
Say,
don't hold the power.
Okay. Let's pick it up on that. They don't hold the power. That's why it's not.
I've been told in Canada, especially because white predominantly holds the power in many situations, should you go to other places where racial identity is a different kind of balance and it holds a different power, you would experience it differently. But North American is usually pretty straightforward in this power
So
dynamic.
thanks for that, Katie. Because that let me just kind of not not go on a tangent, but extend it a little in a different way. Shepard and Webster are here. Do you have racism where you came, where you from the country you originated from?
No.
I know Shepard is from Zimbabwe. Webster, are you from Zimbabwe too, or somewhere? Okay. Do you have racism in Zimbabwe?
No, even if a white person is one among 100 blacks, there's no way they can racialize that white person.
Yeah.
When did you first experience racism?
Oh, for me, it was just a word, but I experienced it when I came to Canada.
And sorry, go ahead, Webster. Do you want to say something to add to that?
Yeah, as Shepard is just saying, we used to learn about racism, read about it in books, but not actually knowing what it means. But when we come here, that's when we can now see, okay, oh, it has this magnitude. Okay, yeah, that is how we learn.
Yeah, thank you. So the dynamic of power is critical in understanding racism and looking and even the being able to name the experience.
So there's a difference though between prejudice and racism, right?
Say that again.
There's a difference between prejudice and racism. So I lived in Bolivia for 2 years, And I was really looking forward to having an experience of being a minority.
Mm.
And while I was a minority, there were not very many white people who lived in Bolivia at that point. Um, I was not, I was treated as being smarter than everybody or
Yeah.
being more valued than everybody.
Yes.
And so it wasn't like I had an experience, like I was embarrassed by that, if anything. But within, like, so I volunteered in an orphanage, and within the orphanage and within a lot of those kind of uneducated job places, and that's where I lived. So I don't know about outside of that. The color of your skin was extremely important. So within the Bolivian population, who are 80% indigenous, um, uh, the darker you were, the lower you were ranked, regardless of the fact that everybody had the same job and the same pay and the same education. And so, but I wouldn't call that racism. I would
Yes.
call it prejudice because it's not like anybody had any power over each other. But maybe I'm wrong. I have been
Yeah.
curious about that.
So the term that we would, sorry, go, you want to say something, Shepard?
Yeah, I think Shannon, you are right because there is no way a white person can be racialized
No.
because racism on its own is like what we have been talking is a coined or a social construct that being white is the unique race, and the word white has nothing to do with color because if we look at our skin, they are not white nor black in terms of colors.
No,
But
exactly.
the whiteness is about being unique, immaculate, sinless, all those good statements we might say. So there is no way a black person can racialize a white person.
Thank you very much, Shepard. And just to add to the conversation there, among racialized folks, we have a term called colorism. And so, yes, we can be prejudiced against one another based on the shade or shadism on the shade of your skin, the color of your skin. But we learned that from our colonizers. They're the ones who told us, you're pretty, you're handsome because you're fair skinned. You're really ugly because you look like a monkey. True story. So here it is. You're looking at me, at Shepherd, and Webster. Who's the most handsome one?
Yeah.
If you put that from the lens of a racialized person, from any of, they will be looking at us based on the color of on the shade of our brownness. But that's something we learn, and you're correct. It's prejudice that we apply, and that is there. But the word racist, or the racism itself, or the word race, is actually a term that was constructed by Euro, Western, or Anglo European Western uh, society. So hopefully that helps. Thank you very much for giving clarity to that. Go ahead, Katie.
My one question as well here too. Um, so I had a teacher growing up who was black and had spent a time teaching in Japan and recognized that he experienced racism while teaching there. And so I think that also complicates it a little bit because someone of Asian descent coming to Canada would also often experience racism. But that's, I think, where the power comes into the discussion here, which is who is holding power in this situation. Um, and so I think also that comes into the intersectionality conversation of it as to what kinds of experiences they're having with people. Um, yeah. Uh,
Okay.
I think one of the complicated conversations I had with someone once was someone who was biracial but presented very white
Hmm.
and very much identified with the experiences of the students who were undergoing severe racism, but wasn't having those direct experiences, but I think was experiencing a different intersection than they were. And so it was hard to find balance, especially when we were teenagers in high school, as to how to react in those situations. So
To
I think
begin with, high
it,
school is really hard time of the life. Then you add
right?
all of that, and we don't know what intersectionality then was there,
No.
the identity. So it can be messy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Eh,
unless we get then educated or we learn more, then we don't. We carry it into adulthood,
yeah.
and somehow then it gets perpetuated. Let's go to this next one. All people are the same to me. Almost the same as we're all God's people. I don't want to sound racist, but where did you come from? Well, we're here. What is there a good way to ask that question? Where did you come from? Came from the hospital. I don't know.
Well, see, here in Nova Scotia, we just say, "Who's your father?"
Yeah, that's right. Who's your father?
Who's
That
your father?
exactly. Well, you know what? Maybe there is a reason why.
Yeah,
Because of
I'm
that
just starting to
history.
think that. Yes,
Yeah.
just
I tell
starting
you
to see
this.
that in a different light. Yes.
I don't know how many of you know Sydney and Sydney River. From Sydney River to Sydney, there's a bridge, right? It's a short bridge. So my wife, before she was my wife, so visited her family the first time. We were walking past that bridge, and all of a sudden, I didn't notice it because, but my wife said, "Did you notice they're stopping by or they're slowing down when they pass us?" And I said, "Why? They're looking at you."
Here.
So here I am. I've conditioned myself coming from Toronto. That's fine. I can ignore that. But somehow there are certain things that I guess you just cannot ignore if you know more of the area or the region, right? And so I thought that was pretty funny back then. But yeah, but see, here's another. I used to watch my father-in-law. He would take me to these hockey games. Really a good fan. So high school, right? Tournaments, wintertime. The people in the stands would look at here's a team from Mississauga, and they're all from they're Italians names. It's a pretty weird name, eh? Because they're all Italian. We went from Isaac, McIsaac, McDonald, anything that's what you would call Cape Bretonish last name. I heard it, and to me said, yeah. So what's the pro? Yeah, that's good. That's okay. I didn't hear it as a microaggression. What I heard was she was just naming truth. But I guess right now in our sensitive times, if you ever say that in that context, there's a little bit more sensitivity now than it was before. So times have changed in terms of our how we have, in some ways, we need to be aware of the how much of this has also been politicized, but how do we then respond to that? But yeah, that's one thing I like about the East. What's your father's name? Didn't the board or council deal with this last year?
Is that meaning in reference to racism?
Is it detour, derailing, or denial?
But
Yeah,
didn't the board deal with what?
I would assume it is something to do with a racial experience here.
I've occasionally heard things like this said about doing social justice based worship services that they said, didn't we just do one of these? And it was like 2 years ago. Like I wore some of my rainbow clergy attire being LGBT, and somebody said, she wears that a lot. And I said, not as much as the other stuff. And there's never been a complaint about the green stuff we wear. So that's been interesting. So you see people, it's not that it's brought up more frequently, it's that they're noticing it in particular. And they're kind of honing in. They're going, well, didn't we just deal with this? Didn't we just do this? And it's like, no, no, this is just, Black History Month happens annually, uh, kind of deal.
Shelley Pick is not here, but December 3rd is always the International Day for Persons of Disabilities. But I was at I'll just say this. I work at the national office. And so at one point my job was to make sure that it's celebrated and we produce resources. And one of the things that one of the comments I heard was that, didn't we just do this recently? A year ago, yes, but not recently. And so it's a conversation. When you're right, in terms of microaggression, it again, as I said earlier, it does not necessarily just happen with racialized people or indigenous people, but it also happens in those what we would call marginalized individuals and communities as well.
And so it's trying to minimize it, right?
Yes, and that's the case. That would be the what's being conveyed.
Isn't there another D?
Sorry, go.
Isn't there another D there you're looking for? They're dumping this. We can dump this on the board of the council and we don't have to deal with it. Didn't they deal with it?
Thank you very much for that. We'll make sure it gets included in the next slide, in the next presentation. Yes. I didn't intend to offend you when I touch your hair. I don't have that problem.
Oh, I don't either.
There's a great children's book called Don't Touch My Hair, and read it to one of my congregations in the past during their Affirm process and recommended it strongly because that had happened. And I said, it's never going to happen again if we can help it.
Nobody ever touches my hair. And that's the thing that people don't realize. People try to touch my son's hair all the time. But nobody tries to touch my hair, and I actually quite like it when people play with my hair. But like people are like, well, I didn't want to offend you. But would you do that to somebody else? Like that's the part they don't think of. Like, would you just go up and touch somebody else's hair? Like, is that a normal thing for you to do in your life? And now you're just extending that? No. And that's what people don't make that connection, I think.
The sad part about that is that it happens a lot with children.
Yeah.
And if the teacher, let's say it happens in school, doesn't pick up on it, again, it becomes normal to other children. And if the kid wasn't taught how to respond by the parent, and then it becomes how would you call it, traumatic at some point. So those are things that, again, the question, if we reframe it. So it's always good that to learn how to reframe experiences. But any other experiences that you've gone through that you want to share before we move on to the next slide?
Hi, it's Pix here in PEI. I was thinking about children as well because oftentimes people don't afford to children their personhood, their privacy, and they talk about them instead of to them. And it seems like sometimes with people of another color, we're almost doing the same thing. We're not giving them their own personhood because we're saying things touching them, that always blows my mind too, Shannon, like that you would go up to someone and do that, but it is that it comes down to, I think we're really not meeting someone else who looks different than I look, meeting them as an equal, as we're on the same plane, we're in the same place, we're the same. And that's I think the big thing we have to crash through that barrier. And I love these, detours, derailings, and denials, but I think that's the cause of them is we're missing a huge piece that human to human, here we are,
So I'm going to push the envelope a little bit here. Um, we're in a Christian setting. We all have done work ministry involved in the church, in our local communities of faith. We've also heard sermons. We've also gone to, a lot of webinars about Christian stuff. But can we are there instances have you experienced, observed where in the sermons or in the Bible passages that are being shared, microaggression language is actually present?
Absolutely, all the time.
Okay, give one experience.
I did a series on Forbidden, it was called, and so each week was on anyway, one was on sex. And so I read the book by Nadia Bolz-Weber, and it put into a different way the creation story. And so I paraphrased kind of what she wrote. Well, I actually just used what she wrote mostly. And I sent it to somebody in my congregation who's much more able to see things than I am sometimes. So, and and the snake spoke it was a vernacular that was very much like you would imagine a black woman would have. And so she said, I'm uncomfortable with the way the snake is portrayed. And I didn't think of that, right? Like I just thought of it being kind of like this quirky little character. And so I didn't even pick up on that. I did change it before the sermon, but I am 100% sure there are lots of times when I don't catch things that are microaggressions like that.
Q. How about the
Okay.
others? Go ahead, Webster.
Yeah, it's like in our case, as a new people in this area, as immigrants, I can say, we normally face some challenges of communication. The issue of accent. It's like I normally hear some comments to say, I don't hear what you are saying. Not knowing in the same manner they don't hear me, I also hear them that way.
Nope.
I also don't hear them. I struggle to hear them, they struggle to hear me. So there is always that dilemma of accent.
It's one thing to recognize, yes, we have that. We have that dilemma. It's another thing to make comments that does not
Right.
recognize, at least have a conversation around that. So yeah, you're correct. One of the things that Shepard earlier said, or even from Innswi's poem, sometimes when you have racialized folks whose first language is not English, you ask them a question and it takes time for them to reply.
Okay.
Do you have a sense why? See,
Yeah,
so
maybe
go ahead.
they didn't hear.
See, my problem with that is that I have to formulate what I want to say
Oh, yes.
because I have
Okay.
to figure out how do I sequence this in English so I sound coherent. Because if I do this in my own language, I'm allowed to go around in circles. So we have to take that time, and it comes out like, oh, you're dumb, and there goes the microaggression again. So anyway, just to the side. Go ahead, Katie.
One of the best learning experiences I had when I was doing my undergrad, I attended a school which was about 50% international students. And so they sat all of us in our classroom one day and put us into groups of five, and we were all given instructions to a card game that we had to play silently. And then they took the instructions away, and we all had to continue to play silently. And then they said, okay, we're going to move one member of your group to another group. Still no silence. And they kept doing this after a while. And you started to see people starting to argue over the rules, like, but nobody could speak. And there was this continued, like, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. And there was this fighting happening. And then they told us, they gave us all different sets of rules. And they said, if you don't slow down and listen to each other, listen to what each other's rules are, listen to what each other is saying, you won't hear each other. You are just going to continue to argue with one another. You're not going to listen to one another, even though you're both learning. So that was a very interesting experience in school where they tried to teach all of us to be active in listening to one another. They were really trying to break down barriers for those students who were new to Canada, but also to many of the students who came from places where they had not interacted with people from other places ever before in their life. They were coming from really rural Canadian communities and had been in a very homogenous society. And so this was a unique way to kind of break that. So it's been interesting to see. But if I were to think of one kind of scriptural passage, jumping back on that, um, I think even in the moments when some will teach using there is no Gentile or Jew from Corinthians, and they'll definitely use it in a aggressive way to very much like, well, God said we were all the same, and so therefore you're not, race doesn't matter. Uh, but understanding one another's experience is vital to compassion and equity for one another. So I would argue that even some of our passages that we uphold as this is so loving, it's sometimes not used very lovingly.
Yep. Thank you. Well, Shepherd shared from Jeremiah 13 to 23. You just want to say something about that, Jeremiah? Jeremiah, sorry.
Yeah.
Shepherd.
Yes, I think I don't know when this was written because it says, can an Ethiopian, that is, can an African change his skin, or a leopard its spots? Neither can you do good who are accustomed to doing evil. I mean, the question is, should they change their skin? I mean, what's wrong with their skin?
Well,
Yeah.
anyway, that's good. Thank you for pointing that out. Mary Jolene, Psalm 51. We want to add something to that?
I this line's always made me cringe because it's suggesting that white is superior.
Yep. So
why couldn't they have said,
here's my
wash
question.
me? Pardon?
So my question is, when you see passages like this, what do you do?
Well, for that particular passage, I change it and I say,
Ah,
wash me and I shall be cleaner than snow.
there you go.
It's saying the
Uh,
same thing, but it's
Very good.
saying that
Thank you.
the snow is clean.
Um,
No mention of color whatsoever.
yeah. Shannon shares, how about people who insist the Christ candle is white? Eh, so I was growing up, I was probably grade five, and I was in a Sunday school, and it's Valentine's, so God is love and all that color. So we're cutting hearts and the colors, of course. Normally, everybody would choose red. I decided to be creative one time, and so I picked black, make a black heart, and I never lived it down. I was the evil one in the group because I chose a black heart. Somehow, I know the kids were kidding, but at the same time, it stuck with you. When kids start teasing, it goes with you for several more years. And so, only because the perception that was given to us, right, that was taught to us, the color. Um, in Mary Jolene again, oh, Shannon McLean is the one who talked about the candle is white. Um, Another one from Mary Jolene insists all artistic renditions of Jesus or the disciples are white European. right? The picture of the white Jesus. We all know that. Thank you. And Shannon says, do you look for a different translation? There's a book, Grandpa is Everything Black Bad. So is that for children?
Yeah.
Good.
And exactly for that reason, like we had lots of books growing up, right? About that, because everything that is black is often perceived as bad. And that's a very hard thing to get out of in the church with liturgy. And so this year, it was brought to my attention, and I never thought of it that way, that White Gift Sunday, it just, even though it didn't come from a place of race or anything, it perpetuates that idea that white is good and black is bad. And so we changed it to Sharing Joy Sunday this year. And I wrote a whole thing. I was very careful with how I wrote it. I put it out, and two men left the congregation as a result of it, because I was making them as white people feel bad. They sat in my office for 2.5 hours, and they actually said to me, well, I mean, would you be okay if all the white people left and you had only brown people in the church? And I said, that'd be great. They left.
You should have taped that and recorded that conversation. Sorry, I'm just
Oh,
kidding.
it was really something. It wasn't microaggression by the end of it. It was just aggression. Yeah.
Yeah, well, when something overt like this happens, it's um well, it borders now on hate, if you want to put it that way, because it's now harming really. Let's go to the next slide. Oops, sorry. Okay, what do you see? How is microaggression depicted in the picture? We're almost done. After this, one more slide. But let's look at the picture. How is microaggression depicted in the picture? Feel free to use the chat or vocalize it, verbalize it.
You know, I can see the hands of that person are white, but the face and maybe the rest of the body is black.
Yeah, okay. There's the color as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so there is an issue of color, and I don't know what some tears means there. Yeah.
Okay. Shannon wrote as well, a white person silencing a black person. Microaggression, yes. Anything else? Observations?
The nails are painted on the hand, which uh, can indicate a assumption that the other person is female silencing female.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, gender diversity might be something different. But I think this image is trying to specify female silencing female, would be the
That too.
implication of the art.
But you're correct. It is one of those intersecting pictures. That dynamic of intersectionality. By the way, let me ask you this: in intersectionality, who benefits?
From what? I
From the
suppose it's like
whole thing of what we call intersectionality, from the experience and from the structures around that.
from the
I'm
structures
I'm
around.
I'm using more the theory coming from Kimberly Crenshaw,
Mm-hmm.
that intersectionality is really about a white dominated structure benefiting from the intersectionality of in identities
Mm-hmm.
and even communities. I'm just putting that there as part of the big conversation.
Yeah.
Um, So the people in power always benefits. And in intersectionality, it's not, we think of intersectionality as people crossing different communities and individuals, characteristics. But at the end of that, who's benefiting from those interactions? Because at some point, an interaction between white and black will racism will show up in that intersectionality. And so at some point, who then benefits? It's the system.
Absolutely. One thing that this
And
piece reminded me of was that there's been an ongoing dialogue about white women's tears being used to silence black women, and how uh, white women would cry in when told they were being racist in order to incite sympathy, or because that was kind of that trained reaction. And so it was a really interesting dialogue to see happening, and the fact that there is so many layers here to discrimination, that that is a very distinct type of women identifying as women, discriminating against women identifying as women.
and I would just say that yeah, anyway, that's good. We'll leave it at that. You've articulated it well enough. Go ahead. Anybody else looking at that picture before we listen to Amelia's narration? Okay, let's listen to this, a reflection.
This picture was evocative of recurring themes that came up in my discussions with people of African descent. The image of the white woman's hand is refined. Because of the red nail polish, it is not aggressively placed on her face, and yet it probably does not realize how threatening it seems. This is the soft-handed touch of a white person silencing the voices of black people. Not aggressively, though, but almost soft and polite-like. As one may say, polite racism. From the people I spoke to within the United Church of Canada, there was no overt racism, but there were some questions and assumptions by white folks, or not having black people be included in things, or being asked as an afterthought, or even white people checking boxes off instead to say that something was done rather than asking black people. The face of the black woman is silenced and frozen. There is pain, but it is a confusing pain. Based on my conversations with black members of the church, there is nothing overtly unpleasant that they faced. They felt that they were expected to give up certain things and be grateful that they were welcome in a Eurocentric environment. For example, people that moved here from another country that were of African descent, it was assumed that they should fit into the norm of a European white culture. And it was assumed they should have a voice only when dictated by white people, and assumed that what was being done to make them feel welcome was enough. There were no conversations being had on why they felt left out, why they felt uncomfortable, and what was missing. It's a confusing kind of sadness because it is not as always easy to identify, but it almost feels like a loss or grief to black people.
Okay. Interaction, reflection, comments.
Let me think aloud. It's like it appears to me that the other woman, a white person, is wiping away the tears from that black woman, which is very good, and I'm trying to figure out, and I'm wondering whether that could be a sort of vice versa. Could that have the same impact if, let's say, the face is white and also the hand is black? What could be the impact? Does it serve the same? That is why I'm just thinking aloud.
Okay, thank you, Webster. Thank you.
In hearing Amelia's voice and explanation, it takes me to that very basic question when we start, inviting people into the affirming process. What does it mean to welcome people? And, almost every church has the sign, all are welcome. And then we realize how that's such an untruth in so many places. And so to open up the dialogue and the question with congregations about what is welcoming. Is it saying, well, we'll just let you fit in these certain little places, but not in all of it? Is it, that we'll learn your name and give you an envelope and that's it? Or, we have to really get down to some, I think, really honest conversation with each other about how do we feel welcomed? How do other people feel welcomed? It's not all the same. The comment that was made about people just using the name Grace, because of course it's easy for us to say and we don't know how to say the other. And so I think we just all need some help in listening carefully to people's names and trying. We have some folks in our congregation and they'll say, well, my name is this, but just call me that, because they've come up with some easy thing for my tongue to say. And I'm trying to say, well, no, I really want to learn how to say your name. And it's almost like that's a new thing or something, but it's hard work for us. And it's just like the comments about accent. Being a Newfoundlander, I know about accents that aren't understood by lots of people. I can put one on. But somehow we've got to help congregations know how to deal with that and help new ministers who are coming to join us to know how to deal with that, because it's such an important thing. We need to understand each other. So how are we going to work together on this instead of everyone just going behind the person's back saying, I can't understand a thing that they're saying? Somehow we have to give congregations and new ministers joining us some dialogue, some pathway to help with that. And, I've heard of some congregations that do a lot of work with the printed sermon document and people get a copy of it and somebody works with someone to help them with, but somehow that path just can't be ignored. We just can't say, well, just ignore accents or you're being racist to say that you can't understand a person if you can't understand the person. And I think our congregations need a lot more help with that.
Well, let us use that as a segue to the last slide, especially going back to what Kevin was raised in the beginning. Intent, even if it is desired to be good, does not make the action less harmful. How do you come to an awareness of the impact on someone and take responsibility of that impact? In a sense, what are those pathways that we can learn, not to avoid microaggression, but so we can challenge when we see, observe, and witness microaggression. Or for folks like Shepard and Webster and myself and other racialized and indigenous folks, the question for us is, how do we challenge and confront the white dominant power when microaggression rears its ugly head? We're at 7:30. I don't want I know you've only committed an hour and a half, so I want to honor time, but the last thing I want to do here is that really just to say, okay, what are your plans? Would you respond? What are those pathways? But perhaps those are things that Katie can facilitate for you folks that later on, or and look for ways on how do you respond and how do we change some of the language so that it's not microaggressive. And not just so in the case in the context of racism, yes, I work towards becoming an anti-racist church, but in the big picture, these are all pathways to becoming an intercultural church, and that's the vision of the United Church. When we deal with microaggression in all forms of injustices, that's the big picture. We are moving towards, we are becoming. We will never become, period. But we will always be becoming because there will always be instances of injustice that we have to deal with, and we have to partner and walk with other people who are experiencing those. Just because your congregation is now affirming does not mean discrimination, oppression of those who in relation to sexual orientation and gender identity has stopped. In fact, we need to welcome in an intercultural church, we welcome the differences, but we also need to be very open to learn and for others to live in those differences, but respect one another. Lastly, though, is that what I want to, and you have named it here, power is always a part of this experience, of this activity, of this behavior. And it's something that we need to confront, because if we don't, that power will continue to perpetuate. One last thing I just want to make a mention of, because somebody talked about white fragility. And the one it was written by, help me here, who wrote White Fragility? Oh, how can I forget? Okay, to the side. If you talk to Black folks about white fragility, that book, the question they would raise is, and it has become a microaggressive item to them, to our Black communities, mainly because she had written it and gained economic viability at the back of the experience of Black folks or of those who've experienced racism. It's almost the same circumstances that surround Buffy St. Marie, where she did not deny, but she didn't also corrected that her heritage is not really in an indigenous heritage, but she continued to live within the narrative that she gained economic pluses in her life and at the back of indigenous people or the history of indigenous people. So even some of the things that are out there that might be helpful to us, my challenge is that, or the one thing we need to add to our knowledge is that let's not overanalyze it, but let's always use the framework of asking, how does the other frame this for themselves? And not just necessarily how I perceive it. And that when somebody raises, oh, the truth, that what they're speaking is truth. Well, if it's true, then there's something that we can learn from that, their experience. Folks, we can extend more this time. There's more conversations and stories to share, but I appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully this has been very helpful to each one of us. Back to you, Katie.
Thank you so much, Mo. This has been, I think I can speak for all of us that this has been extremely educational, and making space for these conversations is vital to our work in understanding microaggressions and understanding how we live and work in ministry together. So I thank you for this. If we'd like, I will close us in a brief prayer and bid you all a good evening. So let's take a moment of prayer, folks. God of grace, we thank you for gathering us, for enabling us to do learning, to share in story, and to be active listeners. We thank you for the gifts of Emo who has shared with us today, and for the open hearts and minds of all who have gathered here, that we may depart with more wisdom than when we came. We ask all this. We thank you in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, it's yes, Robin DiAngelo. Thank you very much for pointing that out. And also this, I need to look at that news about the Truro police.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Folks, appreciate the time. Thank you for the invitation, and I see some of you when I hopefully sometime. Blessings to all. God bless.
Be
Bye-bye.
well, everyone.